supporters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Emiko Omolu. First to Brazil, where two events on Thursday have turned the campaign for October's presidential election upside down. First, a Supreme Court judge rejected a final appeal by lawyers for the jailed former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. That means the frontrunner in all the polls is now almost certainly out of the race. His running mate Fernando Haddad will replace him as the Workers' Party candidate. Then, in the afternoon, far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro was stabbed during a campaign rally in the state of Minas Gerais. A 40-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the attack. Bolsonaro was rushed to hospital after suffering massive blood loss and injuries to his stomach. Doctors say he is stable but could take 2 months to fully recover.
He is already awake. He is breathing spontaneously, and we are now taking the necessary precautionary measures to prevent any infection or new bleeding. The usual post-operative care after a serious trauma like the one he suffered.
Some of Bolsonaro's supporters held a vigil for him in Sao Paulo. The former military officer has built his campaign on an appeal to right-wing nationalism. He opposes abortion and gay rights and promises to fix the Brazilian system. Last week, he pretended to hold a gun and threatened to shoot members of Lula's Workers' Party. Other supporters gathered outside the hospital. His son says the stabbing will only boost his campaign.
He is stronger than ever. He is conscious. He is talking, ready as always. To those who wanted to destroy a family man, Brazil, you've just elected your president. He will be in the first round.
Brazil's former president Dilma Rousseff strongly condemned the attack but said that he was the one who had been stirring up hatred. In 2016, as Rousseff was being impeached by Congress, Bolsonaro praised the officer who had tortured her during the military dictatorship.
I think it's awful, but I think that encouraging hate creates that kind of attitude. You cannot say that you're going to kill anyone, especially if you are a presidential candidate.
Well, Rousseff was making those remarks as she visited her predecessor Lula da Silva in prison. She said the court's decision to bar him as a candidate is absurd.
I do not cry in front of the enemy. I didn't cry during my time in jail. I didn't cry during my torture. I do not cry. Now, when it comes to President Lula and this absurdity, I think it's more than injustice. There is no greater injustice than condemning an innocent person, and for him, I cry. I remember him and I cry.
Talvez seja a palavra mesmo, injustiça. Não há justiça maior do que você condenar uma pessoa inocente. Com ele.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, has more.
There's been an immediate reaction to the decision by Supreme Court Judge Edson Fachin to reject the appeal by Lula's lawyers. They wanted the resolutions of the United Nations Human Rights Committee to be respected. Those had asked the Brazilian state to guarantee Lula's right to be a candidate. Brazil's electoral court had already voted against the UN position on Friday and ruled Lula ineligible as a candidate, even though he has consistently led the polls. Many Brazilians, the social movements and the left here, have reacted quite negatively to Fachin's latest ruling. They say it's contradictory, because he is the judge who, during the vote by the Electoral Court on Friday, had supported the United Nations request, which the Human Rights Committee in Brazil has said should be binding. Now, Edson Fachin has reversed his position and refused the appeal by Lula's lawyers. This effectively puts an end to Lula's candidacy for the October 7th presidential election. And that means Fernando Haddad will take Lula's place alongside Manuela Dávila from the Communist Party of Brazil as his vice presidential candidate. With Lula out of the race, the PT now has the job of transferring his support to Fernando Haddad, the former mayor of Sao Paulo and also a former Minister of Education during the Workers' Party governments. Another important point is that the polling firms have released projections without Lula in the race. In fact, these were done before the Supreme Court's decision was definitive. And the poll from Ibope puts in first place with 22% of voting intentions the far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro. Today, Friday, is Independence Day in Brazil with big demonstrations. On one side, we can expect those in favor of a return to military dictatorship to mobilize. On the other side, social movements celebrating the Day of the Excluded with their call for an independence that respects all those who are marginalized in society.
Ignacio Limas reporting there. A 6.6 magnitude earthquake hit Ecuador on Thursday night. The epicenter of the earthquake was located nearly 10 kilometers from Comandá in the province of Chimborazo. The quake was also felt here in the capital Quito, on the coastal port of Guayaquil and other cities. There are reports of some damage in several central provinces. Other earthquakes hit Latin America within minutes of this one, a 5.9 magnitude in Panama and another of 5.8 in Chile. Now, still in Ecuador, just one day after 92 Venezuelan migrants flew home, another 100 Venezuelans have registered for the Return to the Homeland plan. The Venezuelan authorities say the government is planning to send another flight to Ecuador. Until the Venezuelan government confirms the date of the flight, the embassy is continuing to analyze individual cases.
I want to congratulate this government plan promoted by President Nicolás Maduro, because many of the Venezuelans that are still here don't have money to go back. I think this is a great motivation for us to know that open doors will be open to welcome us back.
I thank President Nicolás Maduro from the bottom of my heart for having implemented this plan. I'm not sorry for saying this. I am Chavista, and I'm going back to my country with pride.
A U.S. Navy plane has arrived in Ecuador as part of the bilateral security agreement signed with the United States. Many analysts question how this partnership will affect Ecuador's sovereignty.
Ecuador's Defense Minister Osvaldo Jarrín and Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo welcomed the United States Navy plane in Guayaquil. The U.S. Navy flyovers are part of the military cooperation agreed between the two countries.
The P-3 Orion airplane allows us to strengthen our monitoring, surveillance and detection operations, not only for transnational crimes, like drug trafficking, but different types of transnational crimes. For some security experts, the current government's proximity to the U.S. government and its military institutions has raised concern. According to the analysts, the U.S. Navy flyovers over Ecuador's airspace violates the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
This airplane has the capacity to carry missiles, bombs, etc. So this is not just an intelligence airplane. That's what our main concern is. The government said it was going to be only for intelligence and data collection purpose. So why is it equipped to carry bombs and fully capable of striking?
After several violent attacks on the northern border of Ecuador, the government decided to sign a military cooperation deal with the U.S. The government also decided to invite the U.S. Office of Security Cooperation.
We must ask ourselves what Ecuador's role will be in the policy the U.S. is developing towards Venezuela and its government. I think a policy is being consolidated in the Andean region, and Colombia's role is very important due to its long tradition of military intervention in regional politics, especially now that Duque is leading the country.
After the arrival of the U.S. Navy plane, several analysts and security experts have decided to form an organization that will closely analyze the bilateral agreement. Meanwhile, opposition and social organizations have called for a protest on 13th of September in Quito to condemn the latest economic measures and foreign policies implemented by President Lenin Moreno. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
Time for a short break. Join us in a few moments.
an occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur. The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The International Monetary Fund has said that it wants to speed up talks on the $50 billion financing deal with Argentina. The announcement came after a meeting between the economic minister and the IMF chief. The country's peso and stocks have shored up since then. Economy Minister Nicolas de Hovne said he had enormous confidence that Argentina would be able to reach an agreement with the IMF. The agreement consists of an early release from the IMF loan following a sharp decrease in the value of the peso. Protests continue on the streets of Buenos Aires over the economic situation. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban tells us more.
A protest took place in the capital city of Buenos Aires by various social movements due to the difficulties they are facing because of the lack of subsidies for social kitchens. They are also demanding their pensions that have been delayed. There was a very strong police operation here that caused tensions between the protesters and the police forces. Another topic that is also worrying is the small and medium-sized enterprises. Some 8,000 have closed down and 5,000 workers have been laid off. These companies are not able to sell their products due to the increase of the dollar and the crisis. This is creating alarm across the country that could increase in the next couple of days.
Edgardo Esteban reporting there. Now, every day, Argentina's currency crisis is pushing more and more small and medium-sized businesses to the brink. Thousands have been forced to shut down, and over 500,000 more are at risk.
The economic turmoil has left these businesses reeling. Many are shutting down each week. In fact, about 8,000 companies have been forced to close. And Macro's economic scheme isn't helping.
I have a lot of concern. The situation is very critical. Many factories have shut down. Others are going down the same path. There is a lot of concern about this government that took office in December 2015. Macri seems to have reversed any bit of progress made. That's why the economy can neither improve nor move forward.
It's a domino effect. The small and medium-sized enterprises provide employment, yet they are facing a challenge for survival. There is a lack of incentives from the state, high financing rates, and no profitability. This equals high levels of debt and payments that cannot be met.
Traction of the demand, opening to more imports, and the high interest rates generate a serious situation, leading to the bankruptcy of SMEs, while others are obligated to let people go.
The strengthening of the dollar, the tariffs, and renegotiation with the IMF has put critical industries at risk. Over the last 2 years, there have been 85,000 layoffs.
SMEs are becoming today a problem in the terms of employment and production. It seems like the official politics are looking to purposely harm the productive system.
Inflation and the devaluation of the peso has put more than 800,000 small and medium enterprises at risk.
A minimum wage of $418 a month has been approved in Chile, but it doesn't come close to corresponding with the high costs of living there. And now government support for the free market model is under scrutiny given Argentina's economic crisis.
Chile is a country where many people have had a hard time to pay for fundamental services like health, education, housing, and water. Now, after weeks of discussion, the Chilean parliament has approved the minimum wage.
I work with bitterness for this minimum wage, hoping for future national projects where the government remembers that there is an organized social basis and that the promise of discussing these poverty amounts that we approve today must be fulfilled.
$418 for working a whole month. What can you afford with that in Chile?
I think we can't afford anything with this. It's very little for a person to try and live on. Minimum salaries must be over $580. It must at least cover minimum expenses like food, rent, and studies.
In the midst of this, it feels like the economic crisis in Argentina is creeping across the border. Argentina is Chile's sixth largest commercial partner worldwide. Where will the intentions of Mauricio Macri and Sebastián Piñera end, who in April of this year signed a series of agreements to promote commercial liberalization and an agenda of development? Economic experts warn of a reduction in exports, low tourism, and difficulty in achieving international agreements on a social level.
I think it will be the middle class who will get hit the hardest.
I think the middle class and the most vulnerable, which are the working class.
A scenario muddying the waters further is the allegation against the president for having received privileged information in the purchase actions of LAM Airlines in 2006, current LATAM. Today, the former president of Banchile says he has secret recordings that confirm it.
Those audio recordings exist, I have them, but the recordings have never been heard by anyone, and they won't be heard by anyone. A lot of people have talked about this, and I want to clarify it because it is important for the privacy of the people involved and the company that I represented.
In 2016, Sebastián Piñera was also tied to bribes that allowed LAN Argentina to begin commercial activities in Chile. These governments clearly shared the same vision and model of development. And now, only time will tell if they're also destined to share an economic crisis.
As Costa Rica's deficit grows, it's shedding light on the impact of corruption in the country.
With a fiscal deficit of more than 7% per year, the Costa Rican government is promoting a controversial new law in the Legislative Assembly and is promoting an increase in taxes.
We all would like to earn more money, but we must face our reality. Without adjustment, the situation will get worse.
All of the executive administrations of the past decades were involved in corruption scandals, including Caja Fiscal, Ice Alcatel, La Trocha Cruzitas, political campaigns, and China's cement. Corruption is also one of the reasons for the reduction in public funds.
I believe that the Costa Rican former president's corruption cases had a great effect on us. It removed the blindfold from our eyes.
According to an expert in international transparency, sanctions are one of the main problems in the fight against corruption.
Effective sanctions are one of our main weaknesses. Many of these cases end with judicial dismissals because they are very difficult to corroborate.
In the last decade, more relevant accusations have reached the court, and for those that do, typically don't face sanctions.
The district attorney's office could not have had enough clues at the moment to prove them guilty.
The cost of corruption doesn't only have monetary consequences. It can also affect public trust in institutions.
Every time there's a corruption case, the trust and credibility in the public institutions decreases. Citizens still feel resentful regarding corruption cases.
Citizens from Central America have a medium to high perception of corruption, according to international transparency reports. Corruption has involved not only the prominent former president's case, but also private companies and citizens themselves.
Those responsible for the worst crimes during the Fujimori era in Peru are said to owe the state hundreds of millions of dollars.
A criminal court in Lima has decided that the $12 million debt owned by businessman Mendel Winter for reparations has expired. Winter was found guilty of taking bribes for steering the editorial line of his TV channel in favor of Fujimori's dictatorship.
They're just basically pardoning the debts of corrupt officials and criminals. Now, they can just wait for time to pass until their debts expire. And what's worse, this is being promoted by Peru's legal system.
Lawyer Carlos Rivera thinks this legal manipulation is turning corruption into business. He says it's an insult to the state and the dictatorship's victims.
They're not respecting the sentences given by the state. So even after they serve their sentence, there's still a degree of impunity for this kind of crime. Going to jail for 6 or 7 years can be quite a good investment if you come out loaded with money.
Between them, Fujimori, his former advisor Montesinos, his ministers, former military commanders, and media bosses owe the state more than $420 million. The legal expert Julio Arbizu thinks that the anti-corruption prosecutors should confiscate the goods of the members of this corrupt clan.
That's what every creditor does. They go to a judge and ask him or her for a confiscation order. These guys have a fine life. They constantly travel abroad, have paintings of the Cusco school, very expensive kitchenware. Well, then the courts must go and take those items, sell them, and use that money for the civil reparations.
These debts might even have doubled with all the interest on them, according to the Ministry of Justice. This money leaves a big hole in the public purse. It will be enough to build up to 300 new schools or 15 new hospitals with the latest equipment.
The Coalition Against Impunity in Honduras is standing with the family of Berta Cáceres in their search for justice. The indigenous leader was murdered over 2 years ago, and the men accused of carrying out the crime are about to go on trial, but those who ordered it remain at large.
The trial of the alleged murders of Berta Cáceres will begin on September 17, but her family are still demanding an investigation into who gave the orders to kill her.
I hope they correct this and prosecute the people we've asked them to, including Atala Zabla, the owner of the Desa Energy Company. They should be in the dock. We hope they take into account the circumstances in which the murder took place.
After the refusal of the public prosecutors to call the Atala family, owners of the Desa Energy Development Company, to testify, the lawyers say there is no will to make them pay for the crime.
It's no secret that the executives of DESA have or could have connection with the facts that led to the murder of Berta Cáceres. We think it's very wrong of the court not to call the Atala family to testify.
The Coalition Against Impunity says there is little hope that in the end, the court will condemn all of those involved in the murder of the leader of the indigenous Lenca people.
We think there will be evidence not only against those who conspired, planned and paid for the murder, but also against the justice system itself. They need to look at this too, because this is not just any case.
2 years after the crime, the lawyers say the evidence is being manipulated in favor of the accused.
I
believe a scenario has been prepared which will limit the possibility of justice being served in the case of Berta Cáceres, because several of the 8 accused in this case were involved in acts prior to March 2nd, which will not be taken in evidence as we had requested.
The Lenca indigenous leaders have promised an occupation on the day of the trial, which will continue until justice is served against those responsible.
Time for another short break. Join us in a few moments.